that I'd be standing up in front of you today on Yom Kippur talking about my mental health journey to purpose, wellness, and gratitude, I would have thought you were the crazy one. Mental illness, that's not for people like me. I have it together. Well, it turns out mental illness knows no boundary. But here I am. When Rabbi Sissenwein reached out to me about speaking today, I felt a combination about being a tiny bit nervous, but also thrilled, because mental health advocacy is now a major purpose in my life. So what happened? I'll start with a bit of my Jewish history. I grew up in Ann Arbor, Michigan, where we shared our temple with a church, humorously referred to as the churchagogue. My dad was the president of our synagogue. In his role, he sat up on the bima every Friday night for services, where he proceeded to take his best nap of the week. My parents, Gloria and Irving Fox, relocated to Wellesley in the early 1990s and have been active members of this congregation ever since. I became an East Coaster in 1993 when I moved to Philadelphia for medical school. Soon after, it was the Brigham and Women's Hospital here in Boston for medical training. I was lucky enough to meet my husband, Steve Liviat, during that time. We met on Christmas Eve, my intern year. We had both volunteered to work the holiday to give our non-Jewish colleagues some time off. So now, when people complain to me about having to work a holiday, I tell them you never know what might come of it. So me and Steve were married by Joel and Jody. Our children were named here. They attended Gan Elohim, where I was on the parent committee, urging everyone to bring in boxes of cereal and cans of tuna. They had their bar and bat mitzvahs here, and our daughter Lucy taught in Sunday school for years. So we've been around for a while. That's me in a nutshell, but it gives no hint as to why I'm here speaking at the hour of response. So let me tell you that story. Before I get going, I want to let you know that it's a difficult story. It may be a bit triggering to some of those who've been through something similar or know someone with a similar story. In December of 2021, nearly 4 years ago, I was a physician scientist at the top of my game. We were coming out of the pandemic, activities were resuming, and I had just gotten a vote of confidence in my executive role at a large pharmaceutical company. I woke up one Sunday morning, December 5th, 2021 to be exact, you never forget those dates, and I developed acute anxiety a few hours later. This came out of nowhere. I have never experienced any psychiatric issues before. My condition quickly spiraled over the next 3 weeks. The first week was characterized by worsening anxiety with a lot of physical symptoms, like numbness, tingling, a feeling like bugs were crawling all over me, shortness of breath, palpitations, and blurry vision. The second week was characterized by confusion, and the third week by psychosis and delusions. While this was happening, I was unable to find quality and timely psychiatric care. When it became apparent that I could no longer be kept safely at home, I was admitted to McLean's inpatient psychiatric unit. There, I didn't eat for 5 days because I thought the staff was trying to poison my food. I was certain the other patients were spying on me. I thought I was being arrested for insider trading at my company, and that my roommate was playing pranks on me. I mean, she actually was, but still. I experienced a scattershot approach to my care, with my medications changing daily. I was discharged after exactly 14 days of hospitalization when I was still acutely ill without a clear diagnosis or plan. For the next several months, I was unable to recover. My psychiatrist had no idea what to do with me. My crippling anxiety devolved into agoraphobia and depression. Even something as simple as going to the grocery store was an ordeal. I would race in, grab 3 items, and drive us home as fast as I could. The anxiety I experienced was so physical. I could literally feel my adrenaline coursing through my veins. The depression struck about 5 months into my illness. It came on fast and heavy. It felt like a leaden weight in my head, and the pain was unbearable. I called my psychiatrist to ask what we could do about it, but she said nothing. Throughout my illness, I was unable to stay home alone, drive, leave my home, or do any basic activities of daily life. My husband worked from home for 8 months to care for me, and my parents canceled trips and vacations and came by every day. At precisely 26 weeks into my medical leave, my job was dissolved, and I was transitioned from short-term to long-term disability. This was not unexpected, as I had an unemployment lawyer and I knew what to expect. Even so, losing my job was one of the worst days of my life. It was my entire identity. Further, I didn't think I would ever work again. I had no idea how to pass my time. While meeting friends told me to garden or visit museums, do the things I love, and I explained this was medical leave, not a vacation. I started experiencing severe dissociations, which felt like a plastic shield, like really dirty, coming over my face. These happen when the brain can't cope with its illness. It's the brain's way of separating itself from your consciousness. Basically, it's a sign of extremely severe psychiatric disease. The dissociations would last for hours, and it made me feel like I couldn't interact with the world. I lost hope. I felt like a burden to my family and to society. I had nothing to give, only to take. When I share my story, I often hear that I was so strong and resilient, but I am quick to correct. I was not. I had fully given up. This story easily could have had a different ending. Finally, one of my best friends from college, who happens to be a therapist, called my husband and my parents and insisted I go to a psychiatric residential in Houston, Texas. We had been in this residential, and we had even secured a spot for me in what's called the professionals unit, but I didn't want to go. I didn't want to leave my home, mostly because I was worried there wouldn't be a place for me and my family upon return. My friend prevailed, and in June of 2022, about 6 months after I became ill, my husband took me to Texas. When I arrived, I had dreams about my family driving me into the forest and leaving me there. I didn't need a therapist to figure out the meaning of that one. I stayed for 7 weeks. The residential, while not a panacea, offered several critical aspects for my care. First, I had a community of individuals who were similarly sick. I realized I was not alone. Second, the environment was a safe place. There were no stimuli that caused my anxiety, such as driving, obtaining food, preparing my own meals, and leaving the house. All I had to do was make my bed. The physical sensations and anxiety that had driven me to near madness dissipated. My body finally got the break it needed. I could sit in one place without jumping up constantly. I could read a book. I could watch TV. I could socialize. Next, the residential offered comprehensive care: psychiatry, therapy, social work, family therapy, and group therapy all in one place. In any other disease, this would be basic, but in mental health, it's nearly impossible to find. Finally, and most importantly, I left the residential with a much more experienced care team to return to here in Boston. How ironic that I had to go to Texas to find appropriate clinicians in my hometown. When I returned back in August of 2022, about 8 months after I'd first gotten sick, reentry was challenging. I lost a lot of the gains I had made in Texas and returned to the transitional program at McLean. However, I finally had clinicians that weren't scared of caring for me. It had been surprisingly difficult to find a therapist willing to take me from an acute care facility. Many won't. I wasn't initially a believer in therapy, but my therapist did something for me that was life-changing. After hearing my story and meeting me a few times, he looked me in the eye and he said, "I know what you have. I've taken care of patients like you. You will get better. People just aren't doomed." He was the first person to give me hope, and it made a huge difference. I met with an occupational therapist who gave me a roadmap to get back into the working world. I will never forget his advice. Number 1, make sure you can go to where you need to go, given the agoraphobia. So I practiced driving around. Second, do volunteer work outside your house as a test. I started volunteering at the food pantry, sorting cans, and at the local aging center, helping older adults swipe their badges in. It was low-level work, it was hard, and it was lonely, but I never missed a shift. The third was go on interviews for jobs you don't care about as practice. This last piece was the hardest. After all, it wasn't like I had recruiters beating down my door. One day I went and updated my LinkedIn status, indicated that I had stopped working at my former company. The very next day, a recruiter reached out to me about a job that I had been looking at before I got sick. Was I still interested? I called my therapist. "You can do it, Caroline," he said. I went through the rounds of interviews. The final round was dinner out with the CEO at a hip new restaurant in Cambridge. I remember sitting in the Uber on Memorial Drive. I looked out the window and I saw the city skyline and the Jenga building, which had somehow appeared during the year I had been out sick. It was a stark reminder of how long I had been away from the land of the living. Miraculously, I got the job, and I started back at work in November of 2022, about 11 months after I had first gotten sick. I was still very ill. When I started working, I was taking 19 pills every day. I have to be honest, even my psychiatrist had a little admiration for me when he realized everything I was taking and I was still sitting upright. I was easily fatigued and I could barely make it through a full day of work for quite some time. Eventually, I got better. It was a very slow recovery. July 27th, 2023, almost 18 months after I initially got sick, and just a little over 2 years ago from today, was the day I realized I was better. I faced roadblocks every step of the way in my attempts to seek psychiatric care. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, oh, she doesn't know how to navigate the US healthcare system. Let me just correct you right there. My husband and I are incredibly connected. We trained in this system. If it had been any other illness, orthopedic, cancer, palpitations, chest pain, anything, I would have been in somebody's office the next day, but not psychiatrist. Initially, my only option to see a psychiatrist was to sit all day at the hospital without an appointment in hopes of being seen. When seeking a more reliable option, I was connected to a kindly psychiatrist who is not versed in the use of contemporary medications. Therapists who did not take insurance charged exorbitant prices, and when my insurance did reimburse, which was rare, they mistakenly sent the money to the provider, me. When we called, they said they had an artificial intelligence algorithm that was making a mistake, and they couldn't fix it. So be it. The only comprehensive care I could get was at the psychiatric residential, where coverage was denied due to lack of medical necessity. Well, I sure didn't see them offering a better solution. It was only with my family's own financial resources out of reach to most people that we were able to pay for the life-saving care that ultimately restored my health. When I was initially hospitalized at McLean, I found a system broken beyond belief. I vowed that if I ever recovered, I would run the Boston Marathon and raise funds for this explicit purpose. This past spring, I was fortunate to realize that promise. I raised more than $36,000 for the Brookline Center for Community Mental Health, making me their single highest fundraiser ever. More importantly, I used the experience as a platform to start telling my story. And as I shared it, I realized how many people are touched personally by mental illness and how my story resonated with so many. People from around the world reached out to me to share their own stories and told me how they felt less alone knowing what I had experienced. Mental illness is the elephant in the room. Everyone either has had their own experience, experienced it in their family, but no one talks about it. It's unlike any other illness. When I look back, even for a long-term, well-connected member of the temple like myself, I realized I didn't think of TBE as a resource during my illness. After all, this congregation must house some of the most brilliant minds in psychiatry and psychotherapy in all of Boston, if not the entire world. So what happened? This simple question has led to quite a bit of reflection on my end, and I think some of the answers really highlight a lot of the challenges in mental health care. First, I did not think that a house of worship could serve as a resource for my illness. I was wrong. In fact, due to the high prevalence of mental illness and general poor access to care, places like our temple fill a necessary void. The temple now has a full-time mental health clinician and art therapist on staff who serves as a referral source to mental health programs in the community. Second, I did not embrace the caring community. When I was sick, my family could have used a meal train, but I felt the need to keep my illness a secret. So instead of sharing it and receiving comfort from our community, I kept quiet. I do want to recognize the efforts of some of my close friends, many of whom are TBE members who were at my side, bringing meals, visiting me, and taking me for walks. I'm forever thankful to them. The stigma of mental illness is profound. This is why we need a separate mental health committee at the temple. An acute mental health crisis needs to be handled differently in terms of the caring community from other medical issues. A special committee, aware and trained, is critical. My life is completely different now. I live a life filled with purpose, gratitude, and contentment. I am so thankful to be here, to be well. I see joy and happiness everywhere. There is not a day that goes by when I do not reflect on my illness. There are reminders everywhere. I am dedicated to mental health advocacy. We have so far to go. We need to improve access to quality mental care for everyone. We need to improve our understanding of the biology of disease to develop better treatments and reduce the stigma of mental illness. And we can contribute to this at Temple Beth Elohim. We're currently working to get a few passionate and motivated people together to refresh the Mental Health Committee. If you would like to be involved, please reach out to Rabbi Sapphire. Thank you for the opportunity to share my story today.